Okay, thank you all for joining us today for the next version of our Financial Wellness Forum. My name is Mark Myman. I'll be the host today. I'll introduce our co-host in just a minute here, but appreciate you joining us for this forum. This is a passion project of mine because I noticed from seeing so many of my clients kind of struggle with financial decisions or be a little bit out of balance financially, that we really wanted to bring this financial literacy to the forefront and be able to help people figure out ways to sharpen their financial pencils, so to speak, and become more well-rounded financially. So I am pleased to announce my co-host, Rick Knott, who is a senior wealth advisor with Lord Murray, based in Beverly Hills, California, but has clients all over the place. Rick, we'd love to have you introduce yourself and give me 1 second. I think I blocked you from being able to show yourself. Okay.
Here we go.
There we go.
Mark.
Sorry about that.
Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So Rick, why don't you just introduce yourself briefly, tell the group who you are, and then we'll get started with some of the questions that I have for you.
Sure. Again, thank you, Mark, for having me on the session. This is a unbelievably important topic. My name is Rick Knott. I am a senior wealth advisor at a company called Lord Murray. We're based out of Los Angeles, California. We manage about $6.5 billion for uniquely successful executives and entrepreneurs. And this is, as I mentioned, a passion for me because there is so much complexity that comes with financial success, and the tools that are provided to us through the education system or otherwise just really aren't there. And so most folks have, frankly, just a lot of questions, and it's partially our industry's fault. So thank you for having me, and excited to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you joining us, Rick. Rick and I have gotten to know each other over the years through a mutual friend, and really valued his expertise in a lot of different aspects. So Rick is not only a retirement specialist, but is involved in all different types of finance, and maybe talk a little bit about your practice.
So I manage about 225 million across 80 families, most of which are, I'm in LA after all, so a lot of folks in the entertainment space. We have some professional athletes as well. But the bread and butter is really just normal people who have a job and have found some sort of financial success over time and are just tired of the complexity that comes along with it. So retirement is a big piece of that, and it looks different for every person. It's just not the same. And so I myself am a certified financial planner, as well as a chartered financial analyst. And we spend a lot of time doing custom designs for folks to figure out what retirement looks like in whatever shape or form, which is not the normal traditional retirement of days in the past.
Yeah, and we see it every time we get a loan application, just things kind of out of balance at times where clients either put maybe too much or too little into retirement. Obviously, it's not our place to tell them what they should be doing with their finances, but we've had clients, for example, who were sort of struggling on a month-to-month basis to meet their expenses, but they had, they were in their 30s or 40s and somehow had amassed $1 million in retirement accounts, but we're basically living paycheck to paycheck to cover their expenses for childcare and everything else that they had to pay for, and wanted to buy a home and really were struggling with how to make that work. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to kind of cover this topic, more of a 101 level, because I think we'll eventually maybe dive in on a future session a little bit deeper. But I've seen this as one of the most critical pieces because, in my opinion, I'd love to get your opinion on this as well. The key to successful retirement planning, or one of the keys, is to start early. So that's why we wanted to have this as one of our first sessions.
Very, very true. And as you said, that age group especially, so 30 to 40, which, frankly, I fall into that group and have kind of gone through those very difficult steps. If you are living in a high cost area like New York or California or San Francisco, Florida, post-pandemic, a lot of these places that traditionally weren't actually are. So even Texas might even be considered, a high a cost area for homes. Balancing between saving for retirement, which is important, but is so far away, versus buying a house that can benefit you in 5, 10 years now, really, for your family. I mean, it's a very difficult decision, and there's a few strategies that we use, but ultimately, you just have to prioritize your goals. Lead every financial decision that you have with the end goal in mind. And as you start off with that, not even looking at the financials, it will make things really, really apparent. And so through our process, we typically have about an hour and a half discovery session with any brand new prospective client. And we really don't even talk about money, investments, assets, or anything like that. We want to know, obviously, what are your goals, but also what are your values? What values do you have and you want to pass down and carry on through your family, through this generation and the next? And that will shed a huge light on what your ultimate best decision should be.
Yeah, and I think there's a big misconception about what that process looks like, because I think people are so accustomed to, the standard measures of retirement planning, like, okay, you should put as much as you can into your 401k and then leave it and just wait and hope that it's enough to retire on based on how you want to do it. But you made a good point that, you want to understand the goals of, like, for example, what do you want retirement to look like? Do you want to be just getting by, or do you want to be able to go out and enjoy yourself? And obviously that requires different planning. So I'd love to hear more about the process at which you kind of dive in, and the types of questions that maybe you ask a client when you're doing that sort of exploration.
It's a great point, and I really think our industry, meaning the financial services industry in general, does folks a disservice by focusing on the minutia, and it is very, very easy to get lost and caught into earnings if you're looking at the stock market, or performance of XYZ mutual fund, or any of the various numbers that exist in this world. But ultimately, money, which is what we're talking about, has no value on its own. It really doesn't. It just represents valuable objects, and ultimately it should be a representation of your personal values. That money is there for a reason. And so, as I mentioned in our discovery, we will not only talk about goals and values, but also large, and probably the most of the conversation oftentimes revolves around people, the relationships. Is there anyone in your family that you're taking care of? If you have children, what is it that you would like to do for your children? And oftentimes those questions will uncover things, particularly with either new couples or even couples that have been together for a very, very long time. It will uncover things that they didn't even know about themselves, because it's just not a conversation that's normal for most folks to have. So once we kind of get there, then we can start talking about the numbers. And there's another component as well, which I'll hold off on for a second, but your lifestyle, which is something that most people know in terms of what they do, but they don't know how much it costs. It really is the most important determinant in retirement planning, meaning how much does it cost to keep you going as you live your life currently? And maintaining that lifestyle over a long period of time for the rest of your life is retirement planning. That's ultimately what you're doing. So after you understand that, then you can get into, okay, what do you have in terms of assets? What are you saving? And what types of homes are you looking to purchase, or what sort of lifestyle would you like to have, in retirement? So it uncovers a lot.
Yeah, and you made a couple of really good points there that I wanted to highlight. One is that if you don't know what you're shooting for, you don't know how to plan for it, right? And that's a big part of, I think, what a good advisor like yourself does, is helps people figure out what their goals are. Because a lot of times I'm not so sure people know, or they're, maybe it's a young couple that, eventually wants to have children, but they're not in that mind frame yet. But retirement planning, obviously, when you're retired, in all likelihood, by then you've likely had children, I hope.
Right.
Right. So you got to think ahead and plan for things that maybe haven't even happened yet, and how you want to protect those clients. But also the other point that you made, sort of indirectly, is that An advisor helps you sort through all the clutter and noise. And it's the same way in the mortgage industry. There's way too much information out there. There's a lot of companies or providers that try to make it so that you can kind of do it on your own, or at least they give you the impression that you can do it on your own. But an advisor, whether it be in the mortgage space or a financial advisor like yourself, really helps people make sense of all the information that's out there and what actually matters and what to just kind of tune out.
It couldn't be a more accurate statement. And, frankly, just to address doing it on your own, I think you should be able to do it on your own. And, the tools are out there, but I think there's one really important thing to understand, which is every single financial decision that you make is two parts. There's the money, the math, the numbers, the assets, all of those things that we first think of when we think about a financial decision. Then there's the emotional impact. And the problem is money and emotions really don't mix very well at all. And so I encourage everyone to be and have some level of education. I have clients, they look to me as their advisor, but I prefer them to be educated about the things that we're talking about. And I go out and probably educate almost too much, but I like them to understand things. But really, you need a blind spot check, because when hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars, are on the line, it's almost impossible to make a decision that isn't emotionally charged in some way. And some of those emotions don't appear like emotions from the outset. But as you dig in and as you have a disinterested third party, whether it's an advisor who's a financial advisor or a tax advisor or some other person, just a member of your family, oftentimes the flaw in thinking is very, very, very obvious to that person because they're not connected to it. And most folks have probably tried at some point a stock market simulation game where you go into the market and you buy a couple stocks with monopoly money. And what you've probably found is your outcome there is very different than your outcome when you actually trade and invest with your own money, because it has an emotional tie to it.
Yeah, and people, I think, get nervous to make decisions, even if they're the right ones. Sometimes just having that kind of check and balance is really important. And I've said it from the beginning, this is partly why we're doing this whole forum, is just to advocate for the financial planning community. Not that it's my job to tell people that they should or shouldn't do something, but I think the more they know, the more obvious it becomes that having that professional advice and not trying to just bear it on your own is the way to go. So let's talk about like when somebody should start planning for retirement, because as you said, people in their 20s and 30s just aren't necessarily in that mind frame because it's so far away. It just seems like, oh, it'll kind of take care of itself later in life. But maybe talk about like compounding returns and things like that why do you want to start earlier?
Time is the most valuable asset that all of us have. It is literally the most important thing. I had to take a student loan to get my undergraduate degree in economics. And, there's a lot of decisions that time can fix or remedy if they don't go your way. And you mentioned that the power of compounding is, Sir Isaac Newton, the most powerful force on the planet. And it truly is. I mean, think about this, 8%. Doesn't sound like a huge number, right? Especially after the year that we had in 2020 and 21, where the market as a whole is up 20% and some companies are up even significantly more than that. So 8% doesn't sound all that sexy, but 8% over 30 years is a 10x on your money. It's just a massive, massive building and compounding of wealth. So my view is, if you pay taxes, you can save for retirement. And what I mean by that is, I have a client who's a photographer and they have a child, and that child is the model for, the subject of some of their photos. And so they paid their child, who was under the age of, I believe 5, an income, and they put that income into a Roth IRA, which is a fantastic, in my view, the most amazing savings vehicle on the planet. And that will grow over the course of that child's lifetime and could very easily be 20 times the initial investment. So the time to start saving is yesterday, right now.
Right. And while we're on that topic, this wasn't on my agenda, but I'd love to hear, any other strategies or things that, like for people to help their kids build this thing and kind of help them get that leg up early on, where obviously a kid who's under 5 isn't quite ready to call you for financial planning yet. But like, how can parents help their kids sort of set the stage to be successful in that space?
I think college is the elephant in the room, and that usually is the focus of most financial discussions as it relates to children. But I think it's important not to forget that we at the beginning of this I talked about values, right? Money has no value; it just represents valuable objects, and ultimately represents your values. And that last sentence is extremely important, because the education that you provide to your child, either explicitly by coming up with various different money tools. And by the way, the federal government actually has a site, I think it's the Department of Education, on how to train and discuss money from age 0 to 3, starting and all the way through. But anyways, I have a degree in economics, right? I'm a CFA. I have years and years of experience, and none of in education, none of it has come from the traditional educational realm. Nothing about credit cards, nothing about any of the things that we live and breathe. And so most of our education around money comes from our family and our friends and our surroundings. And so the best thing that you can do for your kids is just show them what financial responsibility looks like. They will and are paying attention. As the father of 2 kids, I can tell sometimes, even when you don't think they are.
Yeah, I'm taking notes myself and trying to think about different ways to implement this for my kids. But that's not the topic of why we're here, but an important one to both you and I. So we'll definitely take that conversation offline, because I'm definitely interested in it more. Maybe we'll do a follow-up session about that. Maybe you can talk a bit about the different types of retirement accounts. I think people get really confused about, should I put money in a 401k, IRA, Roth IRAs? What are the differences between the different types of accounts, and maybe, some benefits or drawbacks to each?
Yeah, I mean, really, they are extremely complex in terms of the numbers and the 401 this and the alphabet soup that, but realistically, there's some simple decisions to make. You have 3 basic buckets of accounts. You have your taxable account, meaning you get paid from your paycheck, you get taxes withheld, and then it goes into your bank account. If you invest that money into an investment account, brokerage account, that's just taxable money. So if you earn dividends and interest, you pay tax on that now. There's really no benefit to it. And it's usually the pot of money that people are using for a down payment on their home. Then you have your pre-tax account. Traditionally, that's a 401k. It's also an IRA. And that is money that you are receiving as income, but you're not taxed on at that time. So the tax that you otherwise would have paid to the IRS in whatever state you live in, if you have a state tax, sits in the account, and you are allowed to use that tax money and compound it over a period of years. But when you retire, it is taxed like a paycheck. Then there's the third, and I've left it as last because, as I alluded to, it is the most amazing retirement vehicle, savings vehicle of all, and that's the Roth IRA, Roth 401k, and you pay tax up front. So just like the money that goes into your bank account, your employer takes the tax out, sends it to the IRS, and then everything that's left over grows tax-free forever, unless the laws change. So that 10x on your money, you will never pay tax on. You pay tax on that smaller amount, and you won't pay tax on it again. Now, CPAs don't always, like to hear my next comment, but basically, I think everyone should have at least a little bit of Roth money, because the decision is much more complex and nuanced over a long period of time than just what's my tax rate now, what's my tax rate in the future. And frankly, I think tax rates might continue to go up. I live in California, so maybe I'm a little cynical in saying that, but tax rates have and are scheduled to go up. So those are the 3 major buckets. In terms of 401k versus IRA, that's just, is it sponsored by a company, or are you doing it yourself? But I would focus more on those 3 buckets: taxable, pre-tax, and tax-free Roth.
Yeah, and what does Roth stand for, or what does it mean, or is it just a name that means nothing?
I believe that was the last name of the congressperson who sponsored the bill. It's a new retirement vehicle, right? So I believe it was the early 90s that it was created. And
Okay.
it shocks me how few people have it. And I want to illustrate a point. Peter Thiel, if you know the name, was in the news, I think, about a year ago and several years before that. He was one of the founders of PayPal, and at the time, he put some of his PayPal stock into a Roth IRA. And the headline was Peter Thiel has a $3 billion tax-free account because PayPal, of course, wildly successful company over the years, and he paid the tax already. He paid the tax up front. So I always view the Roth IRA almost like a business. So if you have a traditional pre-tax 401k IRA and you haven't paid your tax on it yet, the IRS is your partner in that business. And so if you are putting stock and you believe that you will do well over a long period of time, business owner wants all of that profit for themselves. So you pay off your business partner, say, hey, listen, I'll take it from here. That's the IRS in this case. And then you benefit from tax-free growth forever, assuming the laws don't change.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think reading between the lines of what you're saying, the point of this is not necessarily about how much money you make per se, but it's more about how much you keep, right? And
Yes, absolutely.
taxes and retirement planning, it was actually later in my list of questions, but I think it's relevant now. Those two are very much intertwined, both from general tax decisions you make and also estate planning. So maybe you could talk about how those are kind of intertwined.
Yeah, they're really inextricably linked. You kind of can't talk about retirement without talking about both taxes and estate planning. And the reason being, every retirement account, at least company sponsored, is subject to these complex laws called ERISA. Doesn't make sense here, but you have to have a beneficiary. So in that account, you are designating who gets the account if something happens to you. That's estate planning. That's estate planning 101. And not only that, if you have a trust or any sort of other thing, the IRA actually circumvents the trust unless you specifically leave it to it. And so it's a huge impact. And for most people outside of their home, the retirement account will be their biggest asset. So huge implications there. Also the tax piece, because of course there's tax benefits to those three different buckets. And so, they really go hand in hand. We have an integrated planning philosophy where there's obviously the investment piece. I'm an investment advisor after all, but we have an integrated investment, financial planning, tax, and estate planning practice. And so all of our clients are having those types of discussions with me. And we work very, very closely with estate planners. We work very closely with tax advisors to make sure that people are thinking about things holistically. And just along those lines, I think you're really selling yourself short by siloing your investment person and your tax person and your estate planning person. They should all be working as a team for you.
Yeah, that's great advice, because you could do all the best retirement planning, and then all of a sudden, something happens unexpectedly, and now you're giving half your estate to the government.
Exactly.
So those things are very, very important to be mindful of. And again, this is part of the whole concept of the Financial Wellness Forum. We will be doing Estate Planning 101 as well in the future. So stay tuned for that session coming up. But they are very much connected. And
Yes.
It's almost like, it's like practicing for a game, but never actually playing the game, or something where you just stop at the right before the finish line. And that's never what you want to do. And also, all the retirement savings that you generate over time, if that money outlives you, you got to know where you have to be able to direct where it's going to go.
You're exactly right.
And your family will appreciate that you've done that if you have. As long as they're okay with the percentage of it that they might be getting. That might be a different story, again, connected to money and family, how that can complicate things, I'm sure.
I have some stories around that. Yeah.
I can only imagine. Not sure they're appropriate for this session. Who knows?
The income tax piece and the estate planning piece, oftentimes what's best for income tax planning is the worst for estate tax planning. So to your point, they have to be integrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about 401ks in particular, because I think one of the biggest challenges is there's usually, and you can speak to this better than I can, but there's usually a limited set of options for people to choose from with a 401k. So maybe just from that perspective, maybe compare a 401k to other types of investment accounts that you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah, so that ERISA law that I talked about earlier really governs, and the purpose of it is to protect the employee at all costs, and that's really the spirit of that law. And so, as part of that, the the company that is sponsoring the 401k plan has a fiduciary duty to pick investments and to offer a menu of investments to their participants, you as the retirement saver, that are deemed to be well researched and have done proper due diligence, and I don't want to say safe, but basically are not overly speculative. And so you frequently, almost always, see some sort of very restrictive menu of options, investment options. For most folks, a target date fund is perfectly fine. It's a full fledged, all you can kind of single service investment where you pick the date that you'd like to retire and then they handle the rest. And that's perfectly fine. Now, if you are someone who's a little more sophisticated and wants to do a little more with your retirement assets, which might make sense, the 401k may not be the best option. However, if there's a match on your 401k, I feel like you just have to take it. I mean, imagine if you learn that someone who's been at your company just as long as you and has the same credentials as you and should have the same pay as you is actually making more. If you are not taking your entire match on a 401k, you're basically enforcing that on yourself, right? You are being paid more. You just have to save a little bit to get it. So that's the kind of primary difference between that, a 401k, and something like an IRA, where you open an account anywhere, Fidelity, Schwab, TD Ameritrade, and you can buy almost any publicly traded investment that exists out there.
Right. So the IRA may give you more options to choose from, but the downside is that if your company provides some sort of matching, you're not going to benefit from that in an IRA. I've never heard of a company putting money into anyone's IRA.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. So there's kind of, there's pluses and minuses. And again, another reason why having an advisor help you with these decisions is so critical. I know I keep hitting that home, but I think it's the underlying issue here is that there's so many options, almost too many. It's like the menu at certain restaurants you go to, and it's just pages and pages and pages. Like, this is almost too much to choose
Right.
from. And I think that's why most people feel overwhelmed with financial planning when they try to do it on their own, and then they either don't do it at all, or they don't do it as effectively because they're trying to do it on their own. So but maybe we can talk about a little bit about how retirement planning is different for people who are employees versus self-employed, and what some of the nuances are specifically for people who are self-employed or business owners, because we do have a lot of clients in that space. So maybe we can talk just briefly about that.
There's a lot of benefits that come with getting a steady paycheck, and there's a perception of lower risk, and in many ways there is, but it's extremely limiting. If you are a contractor, a freelancer, or even own your own business, I'll kind of put own your own business and have employees aside for a second. But if you're a 1099 type person, you have more flexibility than just about anyone out there. I mean, it is the ideal circumstance to be in for one very specific reason. You can get the benefits of a company-sponsored retirement plan without any of the restrictions along with it. And there's a single type of account. Most folks in this situation often use something called a SEP IRA, which is a self-employed pension, basically just a mini 401k. I love the Solo K, and it's called Solo for a reason. You can't have any employees, but it has all of the benefits and very few of the costs of a traditional 401k, but it is extremely flexible in what you can do. So you can invest in just about anything within the rules of retirement accounts. And you can control exactly how much you save from a pre-tax standpoint, how much you put away in a Roth standpoint. the limits are multiples higher than an IRA, something around 67,000 or so, depending on the year and how you allocate it. But the freelance person or the contractor has tremendous flexibility in this regard. Now, the difference is, of course, you got to balance that with what's on your tax return and if you need to apply for a mortgage. And so there's just a lot more thought that's involved with it. We have many solo Ks, and we're effectively solo K specialists because of our client base, many of which, as I mentioned, are entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think our client base is very similar. We have
Yes.
a lot of
Yes.
people in that space and, in different capacities, whether it be, our LA clients are more in the entertainment space or, athletes or, just regular business owners. So it's a good mix. But one thing I wanted to talk about is how do you help people determine how much they should be putting away at any certain time? Like, okay, I make $200,000 a year. How much of that should go toward retirement? I think that's a big question that people don't really know how to determine on their own.
Yeah, there's a couple ways to look at it. There's the kind of traditional news where there's rules of thumb, right? At least 10%, 20%, some multiple of your income is what you should have saved up at certain age points. I've seen all of them, and the rules of thumb for a reason, right? Like you are kind of double checking your work. Am I saving enough? And here's what I should be. And they make a bunch of simplifying assumptions to get there. But realistically, the process that we take our clients through is you have to know your current lifestyle. It doesn't really matter, as you said, Mark, what you earn. We work with some very sophisticated, very high, ultra high net worth clients. And I promise you, if you are spending more than 4% of your overall liquid net worth, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you will run out of money at a certain point in time. And so really what matters is what is your lifestyle? What is your nut, if you want to call it that? And understanding that will tell you the lifestyle that you can lead, inflation adjusted, in the future. And most people, that's what they want. I want to preserve my financial way of life. So you have to understand what that costs today.
Right. And lack of planning or poor planning can lead to all sorts of problems. We actually got into this on a prior session where we were talking about how to choose a financial advisor. And one of the stories that was shared was a personal one. Family, the parents basically were given bad advice that they could retire early, and they really weren't prepared. And they ran out of money. And so what happened was the kids started having to support the parents. And speaking as a parent, I don't want that. Like, I don't want my kids to have to support me. I want to do what I need to do to make sure that that's never going to be the case. And I want to be able to support them in their life and college and whatever I can afford to do. But those poor decisions can have an impact, not just on yourself, but on other people who will need to help you in the event that you haven't planned appropriately.
Absolutely. And it, as you said earlier, and we talked about earlier, it bleeds into almost every aspect of tax planning, estate planning. It's just a tough. Ultimately, if you really don't want to dig into the numbers, if you really don't want to, look at some of the rules of thumb, just be ultra stingy with what you spend your money on. And my grandmother took that approach, frankly, and this is a single woman who's really worked all her life, and she's built up a very, very healthy nest egg over that strategy alone. So
Yeah. All right. Well, so to wrap up this session, I'd love to know if you have either a story or a nugget of information, knowing the majority of the audience are people that are probably earlier on in their career, not people who are actually retiring now, but starting to think about retirement planning. What's either the biggest mistake or maybe an anecdote or story of somebody that just did it the wrong way that you want people to learn from?
I kind of started with it, but I'll just finish my kind of personal story. I think illustrates it pretty well. My great grandfather was a plumber, and he was a plumber in New York. And this was leading up to the Depression in the late 20s, early 30s. And he was able to make a lot of money, have a car, not a lot of money, but just enough to have a car, a nice lifestyle, and leave a little bit to some family members, including my grandmother. and it completely ruined the family in a lot of different ways. And this was before laws about where money can be held for minors and all of those things. And years later, my grandmother ended up moving here to California, where I am now with my entire family. And it really highlights for me the importance of making sure that you have and thought through not just how you're going to care for yourself today and in retirement, but what impact that will have on future generations, because it will ripple through generation after generation after generation. And as I said, when I went to college, I went to a nice, kind of private school for grade school, then public high school, and then I got a student loan for my college. And it shocked me how little I knew at the time, freshman year, about credit cards, about debt, about any of the things that, again, we all live with. And really, it's just not taught in school, and it comes from your family. So the most important thing that people can do is realize that money is just a vehicle for anything in your life, whether it's an action or a inanimate object, or ultimately a value, as I've been saying. And that is really the root of everything when it comes to retirement planning.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I've never heard anyone say money has no value before, but I see exactly what you're saying and why. It makes a lot of sense. So very good. All right. Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us and for providing all of your expertise. It's been invaluable to me. I've learned a lot, which I always do during these interviews. And I really appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to future collaborations, maybe diving in a little bit deeper on some of these more specific topics together. But I really, really appreciate your willingness to come and share your ideas with the group, and we'll make sure that the group knows how to find you in the event that they have further follow-up questions or want to engage with you as far as retirement planning or anything else. I can definitely vouch for Rick. He really knows this stuff, and that's why I wanted to highlight him on the session today. So thank you, Rick, so much.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Pleasure to be here,
absolutely.
and I love the fact that you're kind of taking this on as a huge issue, because it is.
Yeah, it's just something we see often, that people are just out of balance completely with their finances, and I don't know enough to tell them how to fix it, right? That's where you come in. I just know to say something's not right here. Like the anecdote that I mentioned with my client who had millions of dollars in retirement and could barely pay his bills. That's probably an overshooting of that. But there's all different variations of that: undershooting, overshooting, and then sometimes even just knowing you're on the right path is also important too. So it
absolutely
comes in many flavors, so to speak. But Rick, really appreciate you joining. And again, here's Rick's information and beautiful face. And our next session is going to be after the new year, January 18th. Can't believe I'm saying this, 2023. I think that was the year cars were supposed to start flying. We're not there quite yet, but we'll be talking about how to capitalize in a down market. So how to take advantage, primarily in real estate, but we may mix in some other topics as well. Going to be another great session that we would love to have you tune into. If you wanted to connect with either Rick or I'll leave the screen up as we wrap, but really appreciate you guys joining us today. Please help us. We are trying to get this information out to as many people as possible. As you know, this forum is completely free. It's just meant to be a way to raise the bar with financial awareness. And it's something that we're really passionate about. So feel free to invite your friends, colleagues, anybody who you think would benefit. As those of you who were attending live know, we have live sessions usually about every 3 weeks or so. And those sessions will afterwards be posted to our YouTube page, where if you've signed up for the forum, you'll be given access to those videos and you can watch them on your own time. So even if people can't attend live, which is a bit of a challenge with people on both coasts to find a time that works for everyone, that's why we post those recorded sessions. So whether you're able to attend live or watch it on your own time, maybe after you put your kids to bed or whatever it may be, we'd love to have you join us for these sessions and help get the word out. So anyone who's obliged and willing to do so, we'd love for you to share this information and share the invitation with others in your network. So thank you again, Rick. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today, and we'll look forward to future collaborations together.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great one.
Okay, take care, everyone.